My name is Eli Carter. I'm 39 years old and I fix furniture for a living, old chairs, water-stained tables, the dresses people inherit and can't bring themselves to throw away. I work with my hands in a converted garage that smells like cedar and linseed oil, and most days that suits me fine. 2 years ago, my marriage ended the way a lot of marriages end now, without a single dramatic scene, just a slow agreement that we'd become roommates who used to be in love. She wasn't a villain, neither was I. We just ran out of things to repair. After that, I got quiet. Not sad, exactly, just careful, the way you get careful around a stair that's given out on you once. So when my friend Brad called and said he had someone he wanted me to meet, I almost said no out of pure habit. Brad and I went back to high school, and somewhere in the last decade, he'd turned into a man who treated other people's lives like a comedy he was directing. But he was persistent, and I was tired of my own kitchen, and there's a particular loneliness that finally makes you say yes, just to prove you still can. It's a cookout, he said. Marissa's place. Bring nothing, eat everything, meet a nice woman. What's the worst that happens? I should have known that when Brad asks what the worst that could happen is, he's usually already planned it. Marissa's backyard was strung with the kind of lights people buy in a roll and never take down. There were citronella candles guttering in glass jars, a fire pit going low and orange in the dusk, and the smell of charcoal smoke threading through the warm evening air. Beer bottles sweated on a metal table that wobbled on the patio bricks. I knew most of the faces: Brad's wife, 2 couples from his office, a guy named Curtis who laughed before the punchlines. They'd all clearly arrived early. They all clearly knew something I didn't. There's a specific energy a group gives off when they're waiting for a show to start, and I walked straight into the middle of it holding a 6-pack like an idiot. Then I saw her. She was sitting a little apart from the cluster, near the fence, in a dark green sweater, with the sleeves pushed up and jeans that had a small streak of dried paint near the knee. Her hair was clipped up loosely, a few strands escaping at her neck. She was a large woman, and she held herself the way people do when they've spent years being looked at and have decided not to apologise for taking up the space they take up. She had a paper plate balanced on her knee that she wasn't eating from, and she was watching the fire with the patient expression of someone who has already done the math on the evening and isn't surprised by the answer. "Eli," Brad said too loudly, steering me toward her by the shoulder. "There she is. Maggie. This is the guy. Eli. Maggie. We thought you two might really hit it off." He said really the way a man says it when he doesn't mean it at all, and a couple of the others traded a look I wasn't supposed to catch. Curtis covered a laugh with his beer, and that's when I understood what kind of night Brad had built. He hadn't set me up on a date, he'd set up a punchline, and we were both supposed to be in it, me, the divorced guy desperate enough to take whatever showed up, and her, the woman they'd decided in advance no man would actually want. They wanted to watch my face do something. Recoil maybe, polite panic. They wanted the story they'd tell on Monday. Maggie looked up at me, and her eyes were doing a quiet, careful kind of bracing. She'd understood the setup long before I had. She'd probably understood it in the driveway. "Hi," she said. Her voice was dry and even. "Don't worry, you can leave. People usually have somewhere to be." I set the 6-pack down on the wobbling table. I pulled the empty chair next to her around so it faced the fire the way hers did, and I sat in it. "I just got here," I said. "I'm not great at leaving things I just got to." Behind me, the energy of the group changed. The show wasn't going the way they'd planned. Brad laughed, a little too quick. "Attaboy, Eli, always the gentleman." He meant it as a leash. He meant play your part. Maggie watched me the way you'd watch a man you expected to walk off a ledge. "You don't have to do that," she said. low, just for me. Do what? The thing where you're decent for an audience. It's worse, somehow, when it's for them. That landed somewhere I wasn't ready for. I picked up 2 of the beers, twisted the caps, and handed her one. Then let's make them stop watching, I said. Tell me something true, something they don't know. She studied me for a second. The firelight moved across her face. I make stained glass, she said finally. That's the paint, not paint, glass solder and patina. I have a little studio I rent above a dry cleaner. It smells like steam and metal, and I love it more than almost anything. She glanced at the streak on her jeans. Most people assume it's from something sadder. Why would it be sad? You'd be surprised what people assume about a woman like me by default, she said. Sad's usually the kindest one. I thought about that longer than the moment needed. Around us the cookout went on, the others losing interest now that no disaster was forthcoming, drifting back to their own conversations, the show cancelled. Good, let them drift. Stained glass, I said. So you take broken-looking pieces and you put them in lead, and suddenly they're the most expensive window in the church. She turned and looked at me fully for the first time. Something like that. I restore furniture, I said. I think we might be in the same line of work. The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile yet, the deposit on one. We talked the way 2 people talk when they've both already been underestimated that evening and have given up trying to impress anybody. She was funny in a way that snuck up on you, dry, observational, never mean. She told me the cookout's potato salad had trust issues, and she was right. She said Curtis laughed like a man warming up to ask for a loan. She had a way of saying the quiet true thing out loud that I'd spent 2 years training myself not to do. Sitting next to her, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was awake. Can I ask you something? She said, after a while. After tonight, I feel like I should probably be nervous. You probably should. She turned the bottle in her hands. Why'd you really stay? And don't say chivalry. I've met chivalry. It leaves early too, it just apologises first. I thought about how to answer it honestly, because she'd know if I didn't. Because the second I sat down, I said, you were the only person here I actually wanted to talk to. And I've gotten tired of pretending I don't notice things like that. Across the yard, Brad was watching us again. Whatever he'd come here to enjoy, this wasn't it, and a man like Brad can't stand a show he isn't directing. He came over with 2 more beers and that grin, the one I'd been seeing on him since we were 16. Look at this, he said, loud enough to pull a few heads back around. Eli, buddy, I gotta hand it to you. I didn't think you had the stomach for it. Honestly, I owe Curtis $20. He laughed and clapped my shoulder, and then, still grinning, he said to the yard, I told them you'd at least be polite about it. The patio went quiet in that specific way. Maggie's face didn't change, but I saw her hand go still on the bottle. I'd seen that stillness before, in furniture actually, in the way old wood braces itself a half second before it splits. I stood up. Not fast. I'm not a fast man. I just stood, and I looked at Brad, who was still wearing the grin like he could keep it on through anything. You set this up so they'd have something to laugh at, I said. My voice was level. I didn't raise it. I've never had to raise it. You decided who she was in a group chat before either of us got here. I let that sit a second. Don't decide someone's worth before you've bothered to learn it. You'll keep getting it this wrong. The grin came off Brad's face like wet paint. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. Because there's no comeback to the truth, said quietly. Curtis stopped laughing. Somebody's wife found something fascinating to look at in her drink. I turned to Maggie. I'm going to get a coffee somewhere that doesn't have a potato salad with a criminal record, I said. You're welcome to come. No audience. She looked at the yard, at all of them, at the careful little trap they'd built and watched collapse. Then she stood up, brushed the imaginary dust off her jeans, and said, to no one and everyone, it's been illuminating. And she walked out ahead of me with her chin level, and I understood that I would have followed her a great deal farther than the driveway. The diner, 3 blocks over, had mismatched chairs and a hand-lettered sign warning that the salsa was spicier than your ex. The light inside was low and amber. A coffee machine hissed somewhere behind the counter, and the vinyl booth squeaked when we slid into it. For a long minute, neither of us said anything. She wrapped both hands around her mug like she was warming them in January, though it was June. You shouldn't have done that, she said, for Brad. He's the kind that finds a way to make you pay for it. I didn't do it for Brad. I know. She looked down into her coffee. That's the part I'm having trouble with. You did it like it was obvious, like nobody had ever made it complicated for you. She breathed out slow. The hardest part of being somebody's joke isn't the joke. It's that everyone expects you to be grateful when one decent person finally stops it. Like a man being normal is a gift you owe him a thank you for. That line went all the way through me. I'd been the decent man at 100 tables, and I'd never once heard the cost of it named like that. Then, I won't make you thank me, I said. Deal's off. Forget I was there. Her mouth did the thing again, the almost smile, fuller this time. Eli Carter. The man who undoes his own good deed so it stops being a debt. She shook her head. You're going to be a problem. I've been called worse. By a potato salad even, she laughed then, a real one, surprised out of her, low and warm, and it changed her whole face. I would have sat in that diner until the chairs were stacked on the tables just to keep hearing it. She told me about the engagement. After that, it came out the way real things come out, sideways, between sips. 3 years she'd given a man named Daniel, polished, well-spoken, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he'd discovered cruelty was quieter and more effective at a normal volume. He'd never insulted her, he'd just managed her. Steered what she wore, who she saw, narrated her own life back to her, until she half believed his version. He'd ended it himself, in the end, the day she signed a lease on the studio above the dry cleaner, without asking him. He said I'd embarrassed him, she said, renting a room to make windows nobody asked for. He said I was getting ideas about myself. She turned her mug a quarter turn on the table. The worst part is how long I agreed with him. What changed? I made a window, she said simply, cathedral pattern, blues and a green like deep water. I held it up to the light and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever made, and he walked past it like it was a coat I'd left on a chair. She looked up at me. That was the day I understood he was never going to see me. Some people just won't. And you can spend your whole life standing in front of them, lit up, waiting. Rain had started against the diner window, a soft tapping. I reached across the table and turned her mug so the handle faced her, the way you'd hand someone a tool the right way around. I'd have stopped to look at the window, I said. You don't even know if it's any good. I know you held it up to the light, I said. People don't do that with the things they're not proud of. She went quiet. When she looked back at me, something in her expression had changed, some braced thing finally setting itself down. Are you always this careful? She asked. Depends what I'm trying not to break. The rain filled the pause. She set her mug down. Well, she said, for the record, I'm not made of glass, a beat, and I'd know. She came to the workshop first, which surprised me. Most people want to be taken somewhere nice early on, somewhere with a tablecloth and a menu that uses 3 adjectives for the potatoes. Maggie asked to see where I worked, so on a Thursday evening she stood in the open mouth of my garage in the last of the daylight, looking at the rows of clamps and the wall of chisels and the half-stripped sideboard up on the bench under the hard white work light. The place smelled the way it always smells: cedar shavings, linseed oil, the faint sharpness of mineral spirits. Sawdust hung in the beam of the work light like something underwater. Outside, a neighbour's mower droned and then quit, and the evening went quiet around the sound of crickets starting up in the long grass by the fence. "This is where you bring the dead things back," she said, running a finger along the sideboard's stripped top. "This one's not dead, just neglected. Somebody put it in a basement for 15 years and decided it was junk because it stopped being convenient. I picked up a rag. It's not junk, it's quarter-sawn oak. You can't even buy this anymore. They just stopped seeing it." She looked at me sideways. "You're doing it again. The thing where you're talking about furniture and not talking about furniture." "Am I? You're a deeply unsubtle man, Eli Carter." But she was smiling when she said it, and she pulled a stool over and sat, and she watched me work. I showed her how you read the grain before you ever touch it with sandpaper, how the wood tells you which direction it wants to be worked, how forcing it against the grain tears the fibres and leaves a scar you can't sand out later. She was quiet for a long time, watching my hands. "My mother used to say I was too much," she said suddenly. "Too much to feed, too much to dress, too much to take places, like I was a logistics problem." She picked up a curl of shaving and turned it in her fingers. "I think that's why I make windows. Glass doesn't care how much room you take up, it just wants light through it. It's the most honest material there is. You can't lie to it." I set down the rag. The work light hummed. I could have said a dozen things, and most of them would have been the wrong size for the moment, so I said the true one, the small one. "There's no such thing as too much," I said. "There's just people too small to hold what's in front of them. That's a problem with the container, not the thing inside it." She didn't answer right away. When she looked up, her eyes had gone bright in the hard white light, and she blinked it back the way she did, refusing to let it spill. "You should be careful," she said. Her voice had dropped. Saying things like that to a woman who spent her whole life being told the opposite. She might start to believe you. "And then? Where would you be?" "Right here, probably," I said, reading the grain. A phone buzzed in her coat pocket, hard against the quiet. She glanced at it, and something in her face closed by a single degree, the smallest shutter coming halfway down. She turned it over without answering and slid it back into her pocket, but the warmth in the room had shifted, and I'd known her long enough already to know that whoever was on the other end of that buzz, I'd be meeting him before this was over. "It's nothing," she said. "Okay," I said, and went back to the grain and let her keep the lie as long as she needed it. After that, we started seeing each other in the unhurried way that 2 people in their late 30s see each other when they've both already paid full price for being in a hurry once. I'd come by the studio above the dry cleaner, and it really did smell like steam and hot metal, and the afternoon light came through the half-finished windows and threw colour across the floor like spilled stained water. She'd let me hold the pieces. She showed me how the lead came in long, soft strips called cane, how you cut glass with a single confident score and then a snap, how hesitation was the only thing that ever broke it wrong. "Same as wood," I told her. "You commit to the cut or you ruin the board." "Same as a lot of things," she said, not looking up. I made her a frame, eventually a walnut frame for the cathedral window, the blues and the deep green one, the one Daniel had walked past. I sanded it for 3 nights until the grain came up like silk. When I brought it to the studio, she went very still in front of it, and then she pressed her palm flat against the wood and didn't say anything for a long moment. "You built this to fit it exactly," she said. "Measured it twice. Nobody's ever built anything to fit me." She caught herself. "It, to fit it." "I heard you the first time," I said. She turned around, and her eyes were bright and unhappy in the way people get, right before they let themselves believe something good. "Don't," she said. "Don't be the man I've been waiting for. I've been wrong about that before. I can't be wrong about it the way I'd be wrong about you." "Then don't be wrong," I said. "Be sure. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. I'm a furniture guy, Maggie. I specialize in things people gave up on too early." The light through the half-built window moved across both of us. The radiator ticked. Somewhere below, the dry cleaner's machines hummed. "You keep doing that," she said, stepping closer. "Saying the thing I've never let anyone say. You started it. At the cookout. First night. I did, didn't I?" She was very close now. "Are you trying not to kiss me, Eli Carter?" "I'm trying not to do it for an audience," I said. "But there's nobody here." "No," she said. "There's nobody here." She kissed me. She reached up and put her hand against the side of my face, and she kissed me, and I want to be clear that she was the one who closed that last distance. Because in the whole of this story, I never once had to be the brave one. I only had to be there and be true and not look away. She did the rest. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet and certain at the same time. And she said, in a voice I'd never heard her use, "There, now it's real, and I did it on purpose, so don't you dare give this one back to make it stop being a debt." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. "It wasn't quite finished, of course. These things never resolve clean." Daniel came back, the way the polished ones do, the second they hear the thing they discarded has been picked up and valued by someone else. He showed up at the studio on a Saturday with a bottle of wine and a speech, and I happened to be there, sanding the legs of a chair in the corner while Maggie worked her lead. He looked at me, then at her, and arranged his face into something patient and wounded. "Margaret," he said, and I noticed he used the long name, the one that fit her like a coat that was never hers. "Can we talk alone?" I've been thinking. I was wrong about the studio. About all of it. I see that now. He didn't glance at the window's blazing colour all around him. He never had. I set down my sandpaper. I didn't stand in front of her. I'd learned that much from the framework of my own life. A man who stands in front of a woman is just a different way of deciding she can't speak. So I stayed where I was. I let her have the floor. I just watched, ready, the way you stay near a thing you love when the weather turns. Maggie looked at Daniel for a long moment. Then she looked at the cathedral window in its walnut frame, hanging now in the best of the afternoon light. "You walked past that window for 3 years," she said. Calm, even, he built a frame for it the first month. She set down her soldering iron. "You came back because somebody else saw what you couldn't be bothered to. That's not love, Daniel, that's inventory. You're just checking what you left in the lost and found." She picked the iron back up. "It's been claimed. You can go." Daniel stood there holding his wine and his speech and his version of her, and not one of them worked anymore. He looked at me. I gave him nothing. There was nothing to give. He left without another word, the door swinging shut behind him, and the studio was quiet, except for the hum of the steam below and the soft tick of the iron heating. "You didn't say anything," Maggie said. "Didn't need to," I said. "You said all of it." She crossed the room and pressed her forehead to mine, and we stood like that. Two people who'd both been left in a lost and found and had finally been claimed on purpose, the coloured light moving slow across the floor. We married in her studio. Of course we did. Where else? It was a Saturday in October, 2 years on. We took down the work tables and brought in folding chairs, and somebody's aunt did the flowers in old soda jars. And the late afternoon light came through every window she'd ever made and laid the whole room in moving colour. 40 people, maybe, none of them named Brad. She wore green because she said white had never once been her colour and she was done dressing for other people's idea of the picture. The cathedral window hung behind us in its walnut frame, lit from outside, the blues and the deep green like water you could fall into. I think about that first night more than I should. The wobbling table, the citronella, the group of them waiting for a face to do something cruel so they could feel like the joke was finished. They thought they were writing the punchline. They never understood they were just the part of the story you skip past on the second read. We have a place now with too many windows, which is the only kind of place she'll live in. She fills them slowly, one at a time, and I build the frames. And most evenings you'll find us in the kitchen with the warm lamp on and 2 coffees going cold while we talk about nothing. The criminal potato salad, still sometimes years later, and she'll catch me looking and say, "What?" And I'll say, "Just looking." And she'll say, "People don't hold things up to the light unless they're proud of them." And she'll be right, the way she's been right about almost everything since the night by the fire. There's a dog now too, an old grey-muzzled thing she found shivering behind the dry cleaner, which the vet said nobody had wanted because he was too big and too slow and past his good years. She brought him home without asking, the same way she'd once signed a lease without asking, and she set him down on the kitchen floor and looked at me with her chin level, daring me to call him too much. I built him a bed out of the offcuts from her window frames. Some mornings I find the 2 of them on the back porch, in the early sun, her with a coffee, him with his head on her foot, both of them watching the garden like it owes them an explanation, and I stand at the screen door longer than I mean to, every time. I learned something I'd somehow reached 39 without knowing. The bravest thing a person can do isn't the grand rescue. It's just refusing to look away when everyone around you has already decided that someone doesn't count. You don't have to be clever. You don't have to win. You just have to stay in the chair and turn it to face the fire and let her tell you something true. So let me ask you this. What would you have done if you'd walked into that backyard and realised in 1 second that you'd been invited to be cruel to a stranger for the entertainment of people you thought were your friends? Would you have stayed in the chair? And the second question, the realer one, have you ever been the person at the edge of the firelight, the one a room had already decided about before you said a word, waiting for one decent person to simply pull their chair around and sit down beside you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them. I read every one, and if this one stayed with you, leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.